All right, welcome back everyone to the Lorcana Academy. The new set, Rise of the Floodborn, is here, and I am excited to dive in. I've been playing a little bit on my own offline, and now it's time to bring you guys some more Pixelborn content. We're back better than ever, and so is Lorcana, honestly. So the meta got kind of stale towards the end of Season 1. Just not a whole lot of card variety, and the format felt kind of solved. There were some very clearly best decks and some that weren't, and the new cards do seem to have shaken things up a bit, at least so far. There haven't been many competitive tournaments yet to sort of consolidate on what the best builds in the format are, but there's definitely some new brews going around. And this brew I took mostly from Lorcana deck lists over on Twitter. They're a wonderful brewer if you're interested in finding more Lorcana decks. Made a couple changes around the edges, but I think it's pretty cool. I've had some great success with it on the Pixelborn ladder so far, and it's a Amethyst Amber, an Amber Amethyst aggro deck, and a lot of it is in the same vein as what we had in the last format. So you have your aggressive one-drop creatures, right? You have Lilo, the quest for 2 on turn 1. You have Maleficent, the quest on turn 1. You have Simba to protect it. And you have Stitch to pay off putting those creatures into the putting those characters in play in the late game to make sure you draw cards. Rapunzel, obviously, Maleficent, and so on. But the supporting cast around those cards is much changed and pretty good. So what do we have in terms of new cards here? Well, in terms of aggressive stuff, we have Pinocchio, which is a new 4 of in this deck. It is a 1/1 that quests for 3 for 2. It's uninkable and it's a 4 of, so you can run into some ink troubles here and there, but still a very powerful card. If the opponent can't answer it before it quests, then you've already made 3 lore, which is well on your way to winning the game. We have multiple copies of different varieties of Madame Mim. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I don't even know which IP that's from, but yeah. So Madame Mim, when she comes into play, you can either banish her, which isn't great, or you can bounce one of your other characters to your hand. And most of your characters are cheap or have good enters play abilities like Maleficent or something like that. And if you have Stitch in play, replaying your cheap characters draws you more cards, so that's nice. And she's also just well statted at 3/3 for 2. The same for the 3-drop Madame Mim, basically exactly the same effect. She has Rush, and a 4/3 for 3 is also a reasonable stat line. Now, where I changed things a little bit was these copies of Merlin. I think this Merlin is great. I think this Merlin is great. The one that enters the battlefield and you draw a card, and when leaves play you draw a card. That's fantastic. You bounce him back to your hand, you draw cards, or if your opponent has to deal with them by spending a kill spell on it or challenging it. This card is almost guaranteed value. And there's a reason it's like a mythic rare or whatever the equivalent is. I wasn't as impressed with this Merlin. I kept it in the deck because it's a new card and you guys might want to see it, but I did replace some copies of it with Mr. Smee because I found that this build of the deck didn't have enough big butts to really take advantage of Rapunzel. So I wanted something that filled a similar slot, was still inkable, and had the ability to grind out in the game, in the late game, more than this one lore from Merlin, because this didn't really. In my testing, I didn't find that this was a particularly impressive card. So Mr. Smee's back in my version of the deck at least. And rounding out the new cards, we have Mufasa. So until recently, there wasn't a whole lot of anti-board wipe tech. The best way to play around a card like Be Prepared was to just not commit your entire hand to it, hope to get enough value that you force your opponent to use it, and then rebuild after that. Mufasa kind of changes the dynamic a little bit. So Mufasa is, when he's banished, you can look at the top card of your library, or your deck, and if it's a character, you get to put it into play for free. So if your opponent wipes the board on their turn, then you get to immediately put a character into play and start questing with it right away. It won't be, its ink won't have to dry when it comes around to your turn again. So this is a very powerful anti-board wipe card. Also, just questing for 2 on its own is pretty good. And it can often, you often have a good opportunity to get it banished because its stats are low enough that it can deal damage to opponents' characters, but also you can reasonably expect it to die. So its effect is relevant. And rounding out the cast, we just have 4 copies of Befuddle to protect your 1-drop creatures when Simba's not around. Low opportunity cost card, turns into ink if you don't need it. And 4 copies, of Friends on the other side to draw cards, because it's still very good to draw cards in Lorcana. Anyway, that is the deck tech. We're going to hop into some games, and we're going to see how the deck does. Okay, on the play, and this hand honestly looks pretty good. No 1-drop, going to get rid of the duplicate Pinocchio. Feel like I do not need the 3-drop Madame Mim. Befuddle might be good to protect Pinocchio. Mufasa is definitely a nice top end. Friends on the other side is, well, maybe I want to get rid of this Madame Mim because this one sings friends on the other side, and maybe I just swap this and go for that. All right, so we found the 1-drop, which is pretty great news. I think I'm down to ink this Stitch to get this Maleficent into play. One of the things about these aggressive decks with uninkable cards is that you're kind of priced into playing them. They're never going to turn into ink, so you kind of just have to adapt what you ink around that. Opponent shows us some Sapphire cards, and here's Popsicle. So we're up against one of these Zootopia decks. What's the fox's name from Zootopia? We'll see that soon. And Judy Hopps, I think, is also in here. So we can bounce this Popsicle to hand. It's not really an appealing thing. They just get to draw more cards off of it. So I think all systems are just go to play out this Pinocchio. And the question is, what do we ink in order to be able to do that? It's probably the second Madame Mim, but this Befuddle is probably dead. That's probably the next ink consideration, the next ink target. But in the meantime, we'll just play out Pinocchio and execute our game plan of questing for as much as possible. Pixelborn got some good updates too. You can see that when the opponent is hovering over a card in their hand, you can kind of see what they're looking at. And stability has been a lot better too. All right, so here's Grammatala. She threatens both of Maleficent and Pinocchio, but not if we befuddle her. So she didn't turn out to be, this card did not turn out to be dead. Bouncing Grammatala lets us quest for a bunch here. It does sort of price us into just playing Lilo here and going for broke. Do we have other options? But I don't think they're going to be killing our stuff so much. Like, they mostly have, like, Let It Go. So Mufasa maybe isn't at his best. I think I'm going to bounce Grammatala just in the interest of tempo. Like, this is a lot of pressure we're putting on the opponent here. So we're questing for 7. We're at 7. It's all of a sudden a 2-turn clock for the opponent. We're on turn 3. Tamatoa was the card from the first chapter of Lorcana that never really got the item back up to pay it off. And here we get to see, we had our first look at Judy Hopps. When she enters the battlefield, you can banish an item and draw a card. That's nice, I guess. Simba's a reasonable draw. I mean, honestly, if we quest for 7 here and play Simba, they're going to have a real hard time stopping us. So, like, maybe the play here is just ink Madame Mim, play Simba tapped, quest with the team. And then if they do somehow manage to answer things, we'll have friends on the other side to be able to draw with. I think I like that. I guess we don't have to ink Madame Mim, but if we're going to draw 2 cards, I want as much ink as possible to be able to play whatever we hit. So I think that's the game plan. So we'll quest with the team, play Simba. And pass and see if they can deal with it. They have to kill at least one thing. And they can't do it. So yeah, definitely aggro them out. That was like turn... Yeah, we inked every turn. That was turn 4 on the play. Just a absolutely convincing win. Cool. On to the next one. Okay, pretty powerful opening hand. I think I want to keep the 1-drop, keep the 2-drop, keep the 3-drop. I don't think I want 2 of these. In fact, I'm not sure I even want 1. And I think because these Madame Mims protect my 1-drop, I don't think I want the Befuddle either. So maybe I'm sending these 3 back. Okay. Well, we have some ink issues now, which is always a risk with these aggro decks. Maybe that mulligan was wrong. I'm not sure. But let's lead on Lilo because we're kind of priced into playing these uninkable cards now. At least we have 2 of them to play on turn 2, so it's not the worst. Opponent plays Cinderella. I think because I have the Madame Mims in my hand, I want a bunch of 1-drop creatures in play, as opposed to playing Pinocchio here. I guess I don't know what kind of song they're going to be singing. What 3-drop song? I guess Friends on the Other Side is a song that they could have. I don't know. We'll find out. So I think I'm going to pitch this Madame Mim. If they use Cinderella, then next turn I can eat her with this Madame Mim, and we're just going to play these 2 Maleficents and pass. They have their own Madame Mim. Okay, bouncing Cinderella back to hand is not the most inspiring play. We can quest with one of these, bounce it back to hand, and replay it. We have to ink one of these 2 cards to do it. And probably it just feels hard to get damage on one of our characters right now with Rapunzel. So the problem is it's our only way to draw cards. Just feels so unlikely that we'll be able to put any damage on it. I'm going to throw away Rapunzel. I'm not sure it's right. And we'll go ahead and quest with whichever one. It doesn't really matter. Bounce Lilo and replay her. Now we're threatening to quest for 7, so if we can find an answer to their character waiting to eat our 1-drops. Arthur, Wizard's Apprentice is a 1/3. When it quests, you can bounce a card to your hand and gain 2 lore. That's pretty good. I guess we can just run this line back, right? Quest with another thing, play Madam Mim, replay the thing. They don't really want to be questing with Arthur because our Madam Mim will just eat it. We can also just play Pinocchio and develop. Let's apply maximum pressure. They don't have board wipe colors, so I think I'm comfortable with this. Suppose we could safely quest with this Madam Mim. That gets us up to 5, and then we'll be questing for 8. It doesn't change the clock. So I guess I don't want to open up the door for them to make that trade. Low on cards. Need to find some card advantage engine. Pascal. And Merlin. But the one that gains lore. So now Arthur can quest. Bounce Merlin to hand, gain a lore, gain 2 lore off the Arthur trigger, if they want to do that. It's an expensive play to make, and it also means that Arthur dies, so they choose not to do it. We have Madam Mim, so we can just deploy most of our hand here. I guess we'll take Lilo back to hand, bounce her, or quest with Lilo, bounce her, and then we can play Pinocchio. Now we're threatening to quest for 10. Is there any benefit to questing out here? If we do, we go up to 16, and a lot of our stuff just dies. Yeah, no, I don't think so. Another gain lore Merlin, sure. And they're getting frisky with it. Arthur's even questing now, okay. Yeah, that's wild that Cinderella never came down when they had friends on the other side in play. Okay, so does Simba change anything? Definitely am down to eat Arthur with Madam Mim. I think that's going to happen. At that point, we'll be questing for 9. It puts us to 15. Simba will be able to jump in front of at least a bus. I think this is just a go for broke moment. Yeah, I think so. Let's eat Arthur so we don't get cheesed out somehow. I'm kind of just like going for it. It's very hard for them to answer enough of our board to stay alive at this point. I don't think there's any board wipes we need to worry about from the opponent. So, good luck. They need to answer 9 total points of questing through a Simba. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do. Okay, so they had another friends on the other side. Get to draw a couple cards. Yeah, I think this bug is still here in Pixelborn. I think they still have some ink left over to use because they used Cinderella to sing it. Opponent quests up to 10. Bounces Lilo and scoops him up. Cool. Yeah, so that was just kind of an impressive run them over kind of game. We didn't have any card advantage engine. I don't think we ever played a card that drew us a card. Just every single card was a must-answer threat, and the opponent couldn't deal with them in their colors. So pretty good showing. All right, on the play with a pretty good draw. I don't think I need the redundant stitch. We have Lilo into Simba, which feels great. That probably means we don't need both Madam Mims. I'd rather keep the 3-drop one, I guess, because Simba will be the turn 2 play. And I think other than that, I'm pretty happy with this hand. Great. Hand's very good, actually. So here's Inking Stitch, and we'll play Lilo and say go. Gramatala straight into the Inkwell. Uncomfortable play to make. And here's Olaf. Great. So now we're safe to quest with Lilo because we can play Simba, and I think I'm down to ink this Merlin, probably. Yeah. Olaf will have a hard time matching up to 𝚉𝙴, so we're happy with that. Next turn we can, even if they do answer 𝚉𝙴, we can Madam Mim bounce Lilo to hand after she's quested. So Olaf quests, and they throw another one into the Inkwell, and they're going to bounce their Olaf to hand, sure. If we quest with Lilo, bounce her to hand with Madam Mim, 𝚉𝙴 still has to remain ready, otherwise he'll just get eaten by theirs. But I still think I want a 3-drop in play so I can sing Friends on the other side next turn, so I think that's where we're at. And that means we have to put one of these away. It seems like it's going to be hard to draw a card off Rapunzel, so again, I think we're throwing her back into the Inkwell. Lilo quests, and we'll bounce her back to the safety of our hand and pass. That is, I think no, that's the Olaf they bounced. Mickey Mouse, we're ramping up in here. And what do? They're thinking about questing with Madam Mim here. If they do, I'm not gonna lie, I'm tempted to just fight it with ours, even though it means having to pay full price for Friends on the other side, because it does open the door for both of these. But they're ramping into something big, right? So there'll be another big character that'll be hard to get these into play successfully with. So probably the responsible thing next turn is just to draw 2 cards for free. All right, so they did end up questing with Madam Mim. We're going to sing Friends on the other side and draw an awful lot of uninkable cards. I mean, I think we kind of have to play them all out, as much as that sucks. So, on the upside, we are questing for an absolute boatload next turn. How much? Next turn we'll be questing for 10. Does it make sense to quest with 𝚉𝙀 here? Not really. He just kind of gets eaten, and that exposes the rest of these. 𝚉𝙀 is nice on a future turn when these guys are vulnerable. They could also have something like Let It Go, getting 𝚉𝙀 out of the way. I guess that would have been a reason to quest with him. Another Grammatala goes straight into the Inkwell. And we're hoping just to draw, I think, an inkable card, because Mufasa would be a great play next turn. Probably the best possible draw on the deck is another Friends on the other side. Yeah, and there is Let It Go, and the target is 𝚉𝙀. Okay, so they did feel the need to get 𝚉𝙀 out of the way. So now if they quest with Madam Mim, then... Okay, yeah, so they just fight the 2. And they have a Mickey on board that sizes up reasonably well here. We did find Rapunzel, which will let us play Mufasa if we... Oh, we're actually on 5-ink, never mind. Because they played Let It Go, that ramped us up, right? So there's no need to actually play this Rapunzel here, so we get the best of both worlds. I'm going to quest with the team. I feel like the 6 lore is worth losing one of these. And by 6, I meant like 8, but we will lose 2 points of lore on a future turn. We're questing for 10, so Mickey eats one of these things, and we're still questing for 8, so they need 2 answers in order to keep us from going out this turn. And they're digging. Develop your brain is the kind of play we want to see. Okay. That's the Madam Mim that does not have Rush. So what do you got? Just replay Mickey. Okay, so this should just be game over, I would think. Yeah, we're questing for 8. We're at 12. I'm not a math major, but that feels like victory to me. Cool. So a compelling showing from this deck. All right, and we're back for the post-match review of the deck. And yeah, you can see that this deck is incredibly compelling. We were able to relatively easily assemble a board state that the opponent couldn't deal with. There was that one game where we ended up with literally 4 1-drop, 2-quest creatures in play. And the beauty was that there wasn't a whole lot of targeted removal. So most of the other decks we were running up against were trying to control the board through challenging. And we were able to just play around that by building a board, and it wasn't unreasonable to quest for something like 12, 15, 18 lore in one turn. So just a little bit of patience went a long way. And even when opponents did have the threat of a board wipe, we were able to play around it by having cards like Mufasa and the Merlin that draws cards when he enters and leaves. Mr. Smee never showed up. I think that if I was going to keep running this deck, I would cut the remaining 2 of these and put 2 more Mr. Smees in, because there were a lot of situations where Rapunzel, who is just one of the best cards in the game still, didn't really have realistic targets to remove damage from, because so many of our characters only had 1 toughness. So a little bit of a nombo with Rapunzel in the uber aggressive deck, and I think I want more early plays with big butts to be able to capitalize on that card draw engine. But otherwise, yeah, the deck is awesome. Highly recommended if you're trying to rank up quickly. The games are fun. They're fast, and they have the ability to grind with the other stuff in the ladder right now. So that's it for me. If you like this video, then make sure to hit like, and if you really like it, hit subscribe. There's going to be a bunch of paper Lorcana content coming up soon. I know Zbex is coming up to record in a few days. Maybe she's already here by the time that you see this video. And we're going to bring to you more sealed, more box openings, and that kind of thing. If there's a deck you want to see me play, let me know in the comments. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next one.